I never thought a simple photography session could make my chest feel like it was clanging against my ribs, but there I was, standing half hidden behind the camera tripod, watching her. She didn't notice me at first, not really, but I noticed everything. The way her hand lingered on the edge of the windowsill, fingers brushing the chipped paint like she was memorizing it. The faint crease of her brow when she tilted her head at the sun's angle. She had that effortless calm about her that made everyone else fade into background noise, and somehow, I had the most terrifying seat in the house to observe it. Her name was Claire, and she was my friend's mom. Or at least, she had been, just, my friend's mom until today, until she smiled at something I said without realizing how my stomach dropped. She was older, yes, late 30s, maybe early 40s. But age was a detail I barely registered when her eyes caught the light in the way I wanted to catch it in a photograph. I had come over to help her with the home photo shoot she was arranging for a magazine spread. She'd hired a local photographer, but something about the angles fell off, and she muttered, almost in passing, "I need a fresh perspective." So, foolishly, I volunteered. The living room smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish. Sunlight fell across the wooden floor in uneven stripes. I tried to focus on the technical side, adjusting the lighting, angling the camera, but every adjustment was an excuse to watch her. She moved through the space like she belonged to it entirely, while I was the intruder who hadn't yet learned the rules. "You're not in the picture," she said abruptly, stepping around the tripod. Her voice was calm, clipped, but something in her tone made me pause. "I'm right here," I replied, more sharply than I meant to. The words slipped out before I could think. She glanced at me, just briefly, but that glance lingered long enough for a jolt to run through my chest. There was a flicker in her eyes, something unspoken, maybe recognition, maybe surprise. I cleared my throat. "I mean, I can step back if you want." She shook her head, but her smile softened, just a fraction. "No. Stay. You're fine there." The brush of her hand as she adjusted a pillow near the window made my fingers tingle. It was such a minor movement, yet I noticed how warm her skin looked against the soft sunlight. And maybe I imagined the way her wrist grazed mine when she leaned past me to adjust the tripod. I could have sworn my heart skipped. We moved around each other carefully, the silence between us stretching thin like a wire. She talked mostly to the camera or to herself, but I caught the subtle moments, the way she paused mid-sentence, as if listening for something I hadn't said, the faint catch in her breath when she bent to pick up a frame, the way her gaze seemed to search the empty spaces, and sometimes lingered on me. I wanted to tell her something, anything, but the words kept tumbling and choking in my throat. So I stayed quiet. Let the room fill with sunlight and the unspoken. Then, as she stepped back from the window, something changed. She tilted her head, and our eyes met for longer than polite or reasonable. A question hovered in that look. Something dangerous. Something waiting. "I didn't know you'd notice," she whispered, and I could swear the room tilted slightly. The tripod, the floorboards, even the sunlight seemed to pause. I smiled, though it was shaky, uncertain. "I notice everything." Her lips quirked, just barely. And then, without another word, she stepped closer. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to make the air between us tremble. I realized then that nothing about today would be simple, and maybe, nothing about her would ever be, either. I stayed a few steps back, pretending to check the angle of the camera, but my eyes kept finding her. Claire had this way of bending the space around her, of making the ordinary, the curtains, the cushions, the sunlight on the floor, feel like it was all arranged just for her. And every time she shifted, every small movement, I noticed it. The curl of her hair over one ear, the way her shoulder tensed when she leaned into the light, the almost imperceptible quiver of her lips when she laughed quietly at something she muttered to herself. It felt wrong. Taboo. She was my friend's mom, yes, but there was more. She'd just gotten out of a long relationship, something she didn't talk about much, but I could see it in her pauses, in the faint shadow behind her eyes. And here I was, a 20-something intruding into her world, noticing things that no one else did. Her vulnerability, tiny, unguarded cracks, pulled at me in a way I couldn't name. When she sighed as she propped up a framed photo, her fingers lingering on the edges, I wanted to ask her if she wanted to talk. But I didn't. Because even thinking it felt dangerous. Because I wasn't supposed to care this much. I caught her glance when I adjusted the lighting for the third time. She held my gaze longer than necessary, a question hovering there, almost hidden behind her calm expression. I thought about stepping back, giving her space, but the truth was, I didn't want to. "You don't have to go yet," she said suddenly, voice soft, casual, but something underneath it made my pulse thrum. My chest tightened. She was standing close now, too close, just far enough for her arm to brush mine as she moved past to adjust a shadow in the corner. That fleeting contact sent a jolt straight through me. I felt my hands tremble slightly as I fumbled with the camera. I caught a glimpse of her profile, how the sunlight caught the fine lines around her eyes, and I realized I couldn't stop thinking about her. About this moment. About how absurd it felt that a single brush of skin could make my entire body tingle. "Stay," she said again, quieter this time, almost like she was testing the air between us. Her hand hovered near the table, brushing the edge, but her eyes stayed on mine. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was suddenly tight, my voice stuck somewhere between wanting and knowing I shouldn't. I adjusted the lens again, trying to focus on something other than her, but the thought kept creeping in, staying felt dangerous. And yet, leaving felt impossible. Her presence was like gravity, pulling me closer even as my mind screamed that I shouldn't. And when she stepped a little nearer, her arm brushing mine once more, it was all I could do to keep from saying the thing I knew would change everything. The room was silent, the sunlight warm, the air thick with the unspoken. And in that silence, I realized we were teetering on the edge of something neither of us dared to name yet, but both of us already felt. I reached for the lens to check the focus, and for a split second, our hands brushed. Just a fingertip grazing hers, but it felt electric, like touching lightning. Claire paused mid-motion, eyes widening slightly, and then looked away as if nothing had happened. I wanted to laugh, apologize, deny the pulse racing through me, but I didn't. I couldn't. She picked up a stack of prints, holding them close to her chest, and I noticed the way her shoulders curved inward, like she was protecting something fragile, not the photos, but herself. There was a softness in her expression that made me want to reach out, to say something, anything that might make her feel less alone. But I reminded myself, this was wrong. She was off limits. And yet, I couldn't stop noticing how the sunlight caught the subtle curve of her jaw, the way her hair brushed against her neck, the faint scent of her perfume that lingered when she moved past me. A sudden knock on the door made both of us startle. Claire's hand froze on the photos, and I stepped back, suddenly hyper-aware of the space between us. She went to answer it, muttering something about a delivery, but before she left the room, she lingered a moment, eyes meeting mine for just long enough to make my stomach twist. I tried to pull myself together, focusing on adjusting the tripod, pretending the brush of her arm against mine had meant nothing. But every movement she made pulled my attention back to her. When she returned, there was a stack of packages in her hands, and I noticed she was breathing a little heavier, as if the brief absence had reminded her of my presence, or maybe reminded me of hers. "Do you want some water?" she asked, and I hesitated longer than necessary. Her gaze lingered, subtle, searching, like she knew I was teetering somewhere between restraint and surrender. My throat went dry. I nodded, my hand trembling as I reached for the glass she handed me. Our fingers brushed again, and this time neither of us pulled away immediately. I could feel my pulse thumping, a rapid rhythm that made it impossible to focus on the camera, the photos, the room around us. My mind screamed that I should step back, that I should leave before this became something else. But when I looked at her, standing there in the sunlight, hair loose around her shoulders, cheeks flushed from moving, I realized pulling back was no longer an option. "You're not supposed to be here like this," I muttered, almost to myself, not meeting her eyes. But my words were weak, hollow. The silence afterward was heavy, charged, and I caught her studying me, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at her lips. Her hand lingered near mine as she adjusted the photos on the table, a deliberate, intimate motion that made the air between us taut. And then, just as I was about to step away, her eyes locked with mine in a look that dared to ask the question neither of us had the courage to speak: do we stay on this side of the line, or step across it? The room felt smaller somehow, tighter, charged with everything neither of us had dared to say. I was adjusting the tripod again, pretending it mattered, but my eyes kept drifting to her. Claire had a quiet intensity now, a presence that seemed almost magnetic, impossible to ignore. "I don't usually let people do this," she said suddenly, voice low, a little trembling. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and I noticed the way her fingers lingered, as if clinging to something invisible. Let someone see me like this." I froze, the words hitting harder than anything I expected. See her? Not the staged photos, not the polished surface, but her. The real Claire, vulnerable and raw, standing there in a sunlight-splashed living room with her defenses down. I don't know what to say," I admitted, my hands gripping the camera tighter than necessary. I notice." The words felt insufficient, but they were the only ones I had. She took a small step closer, closer than I thought appropriate, and my pulse raced. There was a hesitation in her eyes, a question, a silent plea I couldn't name. "Notice me, for real?" she whispered, almost as if testing the air between us. I swallowed, words stuck, throat dry. "I do," I said finally, the confession trembling out before my rational brain could stop it. Her lips parted slightly, and I could see the faint flush creeping across her cheeks. She looked away, brushing her fingers against the edge of the table, a nervous gesture that made my chest tighten. "This isn't right," she murmured, though her eyes didn't leave mine. "I shouldn't feel like this." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's wrong. But I can't not feel it." We stood there, suspended in a dangerous space between truth and restraint. Every heartbeat felt loud, every breath deliberate. The sunlight shifted, casting shadows across her face, highlighting the curve of her jaw, the line of her neck. My fingers twitched, aching to reach out, to close the distance between us. Her gaze flickered toward the window, then back to me, searching. "What if someone sees or hears?" she asked, though the words were half a warning, half a dare. "I don't care," I admitted before I could stop myself. And just like that, the air between us thickened, taut with possibility, with danger, with desire. She exhaled slowly, a sound that made my chest ache, then stepped just a fraction closer. The faint brush of her sleeve against my arm sent sparks shooting through me, a tiny contact that meant everything and nothing at the same time. We froze, either moving, both aware that in another second, the line might be crossed, or held. Her eyes searched mine, question in their depths, lips parting as if to speak, and the world fell silent around us. I didn't know what she'd do. I didn't know what I would. And then she whispered, almost inaudibly, "Are you really here for me?" I thought I'd known Claire. Thought I'd understood the small hesitations, the fleeting glances, the warmth behind her smiles. But then her phone buzzed on the table, a message flashing across the screen, and suddenly everything shifted. She frowned, fingers hovering over the screen. "It's my ex," she muttered, almost to herself. Her eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of something I hadn't expected: uncertainty, regret, guilt. "My ex?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my stomach dropped. I didn't know you. It's complicated," she said quickly, tucking the phone away as if hiding the message could erase it. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We haven't spoken in years, but he just reached out. And now." She trailed off, exhaling slowly, fingers brushing against the table. "Now I feel like I can't think straight." I froze. Part of me wanted to step back, to give her space, to let her sort through this. But another part, the part that had been tethered to every subtle movement, every glance, every accidental brush of skin, couldn't let her drift away, not now, not when everything between us had finally started to feel real. "I'm here," I said softly, the words slipping out before I could second-guess them. "For whatever you need. No judgments." Her eyes searched mine, a flash of vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Then she laughed, low, surprised, almost bitter. "You make it sound so easy," she said, shaking her head. "It's not easy. I shouldn't want this. Not after everything." I took a step closer, careful, cautious, but refusing to retreat. "You don't have to explain," I murmured. "You don't have to justify how you feel. I just want to be here. With you." That's it. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink around us. The scattered photos, the sunlight, the faint hum of the city outside, all irrelevant compared to the space we occupied together. Then she reached out, brushing her fingers against mine again, more deliberate this time. Her gaze softened, and I realized she was letting me in, despite the ghosts of the past. "God," she whispered, almost to herself. "I didn't think anyone would see me like this." "Not really. You're not invisible," I said, the words low, steady. "Not to me." Her hand lingered, almost trembling, and I felt my own pulse quicken. The twist, the message, the complication, hadn't pushed us apart. Somehow, it had made this moment more real, more urgent. And yet, the question remained, what would we do next, knowing the past could crash back in at any moment? Her lips parted slightly, and I saw that familiar mix of desire and fear flicker in her eyes. "I don't know if I should, then don't think," I interrupted softly, brushing my thumb over hers. "Just stay here." And she did. The room felt impossibly quiet, charged with every unspoken word we'd been carrying for hours, maybe days, maybe years. Claire's hand still lingered in mine, and I could feel the warmth, the slight tremor that matched my own. "I can't keep pretending this isn't happening," I said, voice low, hesitant. I've tried to pull back, to ignore it, but I can't. Not with you." Her lips parted slightly, eyes searching mine, like she was trying to read my heart without letting me see hers. I don't know if I should," she admitted, voice breaking a little. This isn't supposed to be easy. Or simple." "I don't care about simple," I said quickly, leaning closer despite the fear curling in my stomach. "I just care about you. Right now. Here. That's all that matters." For a moment she didn't respond, just let her gaze drift over my face, memorizing, hesitant, weighing. I could see the battle inside her, the caution, the guilt, the desire. And then, slowly, ever so slowly, she leaned in, her forehead brushing mine, a tentative contact that made the world outside shrink to nothing. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she whispered, and I nodded, understanding, but refusing to let that stop me. "Then let's not think about anyone else," I murmured, my thumb brushing her wrist, her hand tightening around mine. "Let's just be here. Just us for this moment." Her breath hitched, and she laughed softly, nervously, as if finally exhaling a secret she'd been holding too long. "I didn't think I could feel this alive again," she said, voice trembling but certain. "Not like this." "You're alive," I said simply. "You've been alive all along. And I've been blind to it until now." She tilted her head, and I could see the relief mingled with fear in her eyes. "You really see me?" she whispered. "I do," I said, pressing my forehead to hers again. "I see all of it. And I'm not going anywhere." A quiet pause settled over us, heavy and full, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of pause that comes after every wall has fallen, after every hesitation has been faced. The room didn't matter, the sun didn't matter, the world outside didn't exist. Then, with a small, deliberate movement, she entwined her fingers with mine fully, the warmth between us solid, real, unshakable. "Okay," she said finally, a breathless certainty in her voice. "Then, let's try this. Together. Right now." I smiled, a shaky, raw smile that matched hers, and leaned in. Closer. And closer. Until words were useless, and everything that had been unspoken found its home in a single, slow, deliberate kiss. For the first time, all the tension, all the hesitation, all the longing and fear, melted into something real, human, and undeniable. We were no longer just a younger man and an older woman, a friend's mom, and an observer. We were something entirely new, ours. And somehow, that felt like enough. The sunlight had shifted by the time we finally stepped back from that quiet, stolen moment, painting the living room in soft, golden hues. Everything looked ordinary, except nothing felt ordinary anymore. The tension, the hesitation, the longing that had hung in the air for so long had transformed into something tangible, something we could hold onto without fear. Claire and I sat side by side on the couch, our hands still intertwined, fingers threaded together like a promise neither of us needed to speak aloud. For the first time, I noticed how small gestures carried so much weight. The gentle brush of her thumb over my knuckles, the way she leaned just slightly into me, the quiet laugh that bubbled out when I teased her about her obsession with arranging the prints perfectly. The X message that had once threatened to shake our fragile connection now felt distant, almost insignificant. We had crossed the line that mattered, not recklessly, but carefully, deliberately, with honesty and respect. And in doing so, something shifted inside both of us. Fear had given way to clarity, hesitation to acceptance, and the unspoken became our truth. "I never thought I'd feel like this again," she murmured, tilting her head against my shoulder. Her eyes were soft, almost vulnerable, yet full of strength. "Not for anyone. You've always deserved this," I said softly. "Someone who notices, who stays, who sees all of it. I just happened to be the lucky one to catch up." She laughed lightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Lucky us," she whispered. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet realization that we had both chosen this, with all its imperfections, risks, and complexities. Age, circumstance, the past, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the here, the now, the fragile, beautiful connection we'd fought to acknowledge. And as we sat together, letting the room and the sunlight witness our unspoken vow, I realized something important. Life didn't offer perfect moments. But it offered real ones, messy and fleeting and honest. And sometimes that was more than enough. So we stayed there, holding on to the quiet, holding on to each other, letting the world outside wait. We didn't need grand gestures or proclamations. We had found each other, finally, and that was enough. And to you, watching this story unfold, did it make your heart skip a beat too? Did you feel the tension, the longing, the eventual release? If you enjoyed the story, I'd love to hear what kind of tales pull at your heartstrings next. Do you like slow burn romances, impossible loves, or forbidden connections? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Because every story is better when it's felt together.